Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the Smoak Break here on the Smoak Break College Football channel. Please hit that like and subscribe button. But regardless, hope you're having a good week. We're here with you on Tuesdays and Thursdays for about 15 to 20 minutes, talking just stories of interest from around the world of college football for you to enjoy on your drive to work, on your walk after work, on your lunch break, whenever that may be. However you join us, we do appreciate it. And, man, we had some bangers, as we like to talk about them on the show this past weekend. Week one, we made a handful of picks, and it did not go well for anybody on our show 365 Sports. I technically won at 2-3, but under 500 is no bueno. Much better rebound, I think, with a little bit of evidence and a little bit more of an idea on who these teams actually are, and just kind of back into the groove of things. Week two, much better at 5-0 with some very interesting games across the country. Week three's got an enticing slate in some ways, and in some ways a little bit more bland, which means it might be the best college football weekend of the three that we've seen so far, but that'll be more for Thursday's show. Here on Tuesdays, we'll take more of a look back, and, well, the game to start off with was Oklahoma and Michigan out in Norman, Oklahoma, and their brand new, shiny, electric factory of a quarterback, John Mateer, 24-13 over the Michigan Wolverines. This is a game where I was a little bit concerned about Oklahoma, just I think more out of respect for Michigan than anything else. But I defaulted ultimately to the quarterback position. And John Mateer, the veteran, versus Bryce Underwood, the rookie. I think you saw that experience come into play in this game. I also think right now John Mateer is just a better player as well, but he certainly wasn't alone in his performance and his contributions. While he was dynamic, and you saw why Wazoo fans were brokenhearted when he left, and you see why he's on the top of mind for a lot of people when it comes to the Heisman Trophy vote. He also had a lot of help. That defense for Brent Venables, as expected, was fantastic all night long versus the Wolverines, outside of giving up a big run play early on with Justice Haynes. But Deion Burks, great to have healthy wide receivers and a capable quarterback. Mateer to Burks was a big-time combination on Saturday. And just in general, the wide receiving core healthier, and the Sooners much better off for it. Now, that ground game, still a bit of a question mark, even though they have some talented players in that backfield. Jade Knott dealing with some health injuries. I guess that would all go hand in hand, right? But they're dealing with some health issues, or is he just not quite maybe what they thought they bought at the time? That remains to be seen, but really keeping an eye on that run game moving forward for Oklahoma. Nevertheless, thought at home with an experienced quarterback, they would win that football game, and they did take care of business as expected. So a really nice win in that one, 1-0 there. Duke and Illinois, this was a shot in the dark. I mean, Illinois, I just felt like it proven more was the better team, more experienced, a quarterback in some ways, although Darian Mensah plenty of experience, but at the Power 4 level, if you will. I don't think there's a massive jump from Tulane to Duke, but that just played partly into my thinking. Duke was at home, but I don't really think of that area or that particular fan base and think, oh, man, Illinois doesn't know what they're walking into. The same team that rolls into Ann Arbor and Columbus on a regular basis, Happy Valley. I didn't think that would play much of a factor, but it didn't matter. They could have played this on the sun. Illinois was going to roll 45-19. Big win for the Illini, so good for them. When it came to that one, Iowa State, Iowa, always a CyHawk low-scoring affair. This year, no different. Kyle Conrarty, the hero, 2 years in a row, the big walk-off field goal for the Cyclones to keep them perfect at 3-0. And, man, what a start to the season for Matt Campbell and company. Played in the Big 12 title game last year, got embarrassed by Arizona State when all was said and done, but they are sitting pretty with two big wins under their belt at this point, and a long way to go, but I don't think you'd trade their resume for just about anybody's in the country other than maybe USF. So a really nice start for Iowa State, and they're starting to build a little bit in this rivalry against the Hawkeyes as well that for so long was pretty one-sided. So felt good about that one, although it definitely got dicey at the end. But Kyle Conrarty, the hero, once again for Iowa State. Also looking around at games from this past weekend, Baylor over SMU. This one definitely got dicey for the Bears early on. Looked like they were going to be trounced. Looked like we might be talking about Dave Aranda on the hot seat by week number 3. And felt awfully similar in some ways before the end result, obviously, to last year in Colorado, that whole debacle at the end of the game. Now, not in the fashion in which the game unfolded, but more along the lines of digging yourself a hole and not leaving your fan base with a whole lot of reason for optimism that it'll turn around. But when you flip that result on its head and you stage the comeback that Baylor did, and then you force overtime and get into that bad boy and take care of business and get a big win on the road against the top 25 team, your first top 25 win in nearly 5 years. Man, that flips the emotions. And so they're at one point early in that game feeling like we're going to talk hot seat with Dave Aranda and coaching hot boards. And, man, this is going to be a long season. And an hour later, we're talking about Sawyer Robertson being in the Heisman Trophy race, or at least being one of the most prolific quarterbacks through 2 weeks. We're talking about that really terrific Baylor wide receiving core and overall the passing game in general. I think if you're throwing around the word elite, there's nowhere on that team I would throw around the word elite except for the passing offense, because right now I do think that the label does fit, and that's not a label I give out just willy-nilly. So valiant effort, really a great sign for the Aranda doubters. Not that you didn't think the team was bought into him, but I think it's very encouraging the way they responded to adversity, and that was a huge win for a lot of different reasons for Baylor. So really enjoyed watching that one as it unfolded, even though it was a very dicey game for the most part for the Baylor Bears early on. And I'm thinking there's one more game, and I'm trying to remember what that game was. Garrett, do you have any idea what that fifth game was that we picked? I thought I had it here. We had Baylor SMU.
We had Baylor SMU.
Kansas Missouri. Is that the one I'm thinking of? War. Kansas Missouri. Picked Missouri in this game, and boy, that looked like it was dicey early on as well. Kansas jumps out to an early lead. Missouri helped them do that. And I think it's one of those games where you sort of sigh at it if you're looking at it from a Big 12 perspective, because we know that there is this uphill climb and there's this feeling of like almost inferiority. Not that the fans or the teams themselves feel inferior, but that you're viewed as inferior when it comes to the Big 12 versus the SEC and the Big 10. You don't hear it so much with the Big 10 because there's not as much lap over. I think just regionally, the SEC, you've got teams that are intermingled here in the state of Texas all over, for example. And so there is that kind of big brother, little brother sort of thing going on. So you really have this feeling of when you get these opportunities, you got to go out and knock these bullies on the chin. And it felt like Kansas was going to do that. They were going to go pull a big win over an SEC team, a quality team on the road at their place. And they got the opportunities early on, got a lead, and had more opportunities later on to try and seal that game. And unfortunately, for example, a big drop that would have gotten you a first down, chewed more clock, and maybe ultimately sealed the game instead is, in fact, a drop and leads to Missouri getting the ball back, and eventually Bo Pribula finishing off the massive comeback for the Tigers at home and what was a great win for Mizzou. Just felt like them at home, and ultimately a slight talent advantage would put them over the top. And I think that's the scary realization when you see a Baylor versus an Auburn, for an example, or a game like this, where if you are slightly inferior when it comes to like the talent and just kind of the whole package, you can't do anything but play pretty much perfect. You can't have a drop ball that would have moved the chains that instead becomes a punting situation. You got to make that catch. You got to make that throw. You got to make it a touchdown instead of a field goal. And Kansas' opportunities to do all those things did not do enough of that and allow the door to just stay cracked open enough for Missouri to eventually just overwhelm them and outplay them. And I think you saw that with Baylor-Auburn, for example. Baylor had those opportunities early on, like, hey, you go for it on fourth down, you get stopped. You needed to convert that. If you do, maybe you build up a 10-0 lead or a 14-0 lead or a 17-0 lead, and then Auburn doesn't stand much of a chance. But when you let them stick around and the score is 6-0 instead of 14-0, well, then eventually I think that talent and just the overall package, again, I don't really know how else to explain it other than the inherent advantages they have pretty much across the board, much like a Big 12 team playing, well, not going to talk a lot of crap, but most SCS teams, it's kind of similar, maybe not as much of an advantage, but it's similar in that way. So when they're vulnerable, you really got to stick the dagger in, and Kansas could not do that. Missouri rallies, wins that game. Again, a big win for the Tigers, and not a good look for KU to not close that one out, and just a bad feeling, I think, overall this weekend. Some of the results coming out of the Big 12, and that was definitely one of those big ones, not to mention the couple of G5 losses that you took as well. So fun weekend, 5-0. Don't know yet what 5 games we're going to be talking about next week, but those were a lot of fun to watch and to watch unfold this past weekend. And man, what a weekend it was. I think Oklahoma is legit. as legit gets. I'm not putting them in the top 5 just yet or even the top 10, but I do think that they are a very real contender. I think Missouri, with Pribula playing as well as he is, very real contenders as well. I think KU still has a lot to like. Jalen Daniels looked really good at times, had some big runs to pick up first downs, and I think Kansas is going to have some exciting things in store, but Missouri just a little bit too much for the Jayhawks over the course of 4 quarters. So, I'm looking forward to week 3. Again, as we start to keep trickling on now, still some more non-con matchups that are of interest, but a lot of sort of the play, the pay-in games, I guess, as you could call them. Some of those like, hey, we'll give you 500,000, come down here and get beat by 40. There's some of those this weekend to be certain, but we're starting to dip our toes into conference schedules as well, which is very exciting. And right now, I think you look at the SEC, pretty much a wide open race. Like Oklahoma, are they a contender? I think you've got to consider them. Auburn, yeah, right now you got to consider them. And then the obvious suspects like an LSU and a Georgia, of course. Alabama, so much for Tuscaloosa burning down, looked as sharp as anybody in week number 2. So that conference is as much for the taking as ever before. I think in the Big 12, very similar. There are some contenders that have fallen off. Looking at you, K-State. But I think you still got your Iowa States, your BYUs, your Utahs. They're going to make things very, very interesting. I think Baylor's still a very interesting team in the grand scheme of things. TCU as well. And I'm not trying to leave anybody out, but just kind of hitting most of the bases there. So there's probably 1 or 2 teams I didn't mention, but K-State I definitely mentioned in the non-contender list because until they prove otherwise, and even if they do prove otherwise, they can go win the Big 12, but playoffs is the only way to even think about that is to go on a pretty incredible run the rest of the way. We'll see if Avery Johnson and company can do that, but I have my doubts, and I think K-State fans do as well. But I think you'd go ahead and take them out of the contender list. And then again, they haven't played but the one Big 12 game, so we'll see there. ACC, Florida State looks really good. Miami looks really good. I think the rest of that league's kind of boo-boo based on what we've seen so far. UNC is no threat with Bill Belichick. Clemson, narrowly avoided disaster this past weekend. The middle of the pack, maybe there's some good teams there that go toe-to-toe with some other leagues if you want to compare that, but I do feel like it's and at Georgia Tech, if you want to throw them into the mix along with a Miami, for example, then that league looks like it's maybe a little bit more of a narrower group at the top. And the Big Ten, I think Ohio State, Oregon sounds like a pretty good rematch, although Penn State will have something to say about that as well. Those 3 teams looking impressive, and that Oregon destruction of Oklahoma State, my goodness. Shield your children's eyes from that beatdown. That was something else, and I think aided to what was overall a very middle of the road at your most optimistic feeling walking out of that one as a Big 12 fan in terms of the crossover matchups. The ACC, and not much better, but we'll have more talk on conference supremacy if you're into that sort of thing on 365 Sports on Tuesday afternoon. So if you want to check out that episode, we cover some of the crossover games, but wanted to touch here in the early part of the week on the games from this past weekend that were of most interest. And yeah, man, a lot of fun. And yet it already feels like it's flying by, does it not? We're already entering week 3, and it feels like the season just started a couple of days ago. So let's embrace it and take it a day at a time and very much live in the moment, I think, because if you get too caught up in the next week and the next week and the next week, the next thing you know, we're at the end of the season and you've hardly taken it all in. So hopefully you're doing what I'm doing and really appreciating each weekend for what it is. And week number 3, not shaping up to be the sexiest necessarily, but we know that, again, sometimes that means it turns out to be the most exciting, and there are enough matchups to nibble on that make it enticing. And let's face it, we're all the type of college football fans that you could throw out blank team versus blank team. As long as we know teams are showing up, we would probably check it out anyways. So until next time, we'll get into this weekend's games and the big mega matchups and the crossover games and where things kind of all sit by Thursday of week number 3 of the season. But enjoyed week number 2. Enjoyed talking to you guys on a weekly basis at this point. And if this thing's successful, then maybe on a daily basis. To make that happen, please hit that like button, that subscribe button, tell a friend, and share. And we do appreciate your time as always. I'm Craig Smoak, and this has been the Smoak Break, talking college football on the Smoak Break College Football Channel.